Hello, my name is Eric Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today's topic came about due to requests and questions from viewers. It's been said that I've made a lot of videos about non-duality and enlightenment, but I don't say a lot about what to do. and uh, and so there's been requests to give guidance and to suggest things to do. Let's start by saying no matter what you do, you can't cause enlightenment or realization to happen. Enlightenment can be defined as a seeing through the me, and there's nothing the me can do to see through itself. The very fact of a me trying to do something only reinforces the illusion of the me all the more. What we can do is set a conducive environment. It's kind of like when we try to fall asleep. We go into a dark, quiet room, we get comfortable. We don't willfully cause sleep, because if we're trying to fall asleep, we find we can't fall asleep and we're awake far longer than if we just let sleep happen. Sleep happens. Similarly, awakening happens. It's a grace. And so when I talk about these are things you can do, don't think that it will cause awakening. Matter of fact, it's best if you just do the exercises or practices that, or whatever I suggest, simply for its own sake, not to get anything out of it. In answering the requests, I think it'd be fun to answer it more in the framework of if I was trying to explain to uh, a true student or disciple, or someone wanted to know from scratch kind of the overview of what to do. And so I'm going to try to go from that standpoint. And so I'd say, first of all, that there are two guiding principles that will help, guide the way a bit. One is it's not about what you do, it's more about what you cease doing. Cease doing is a guiding light. The less you're doing, usually the better. The second guiding principle would be to distinguish between what is and what isn't, and to attend to what is, and don't attend and focus so much on what isn't, because it isn't. Similarly, this is kind of like in classic Indian or Hindu philosophy, where they talk about um, the need to distinguish between real and unreal, or that which exists and that which doesn't exist. Well, when you say real or that which exists, what you're really saying is what is. And when you're saying unreal or doesn't exist, it's what isn't. And so I'm kind of similar in that point, where I'm saying it's very important to, as a guiding principle, to distinguish between what is and what isn't. Those two principles intermingle throughout everything. But I would say the first thing I would suggest in doing, and it's not even really a doing, is to be present, is to live consciously. Live consciously and be present. Now, when you're being present, the reason this isn't a doing is because if you were doing absolutely nothing, you would automatically be present. When we're not being present, what's happening is we're being distracted by thought about past, thought about future, pure daydreaming or imagination. Basically, that which isn't right now. And so when you're being present, you're attending and focused on what is now. And being thought can never be about right now. It can, at best can be about a moment ago or a moment to come. You don't really pay attention to thought. You let it go. If thought arises, don't fight it, because if you try to fight the mind, you're just going to agitate the mind. But if thought arises, let it go. Don't worry about it. Just focus on the now. Attend to the now. Become, attuned to the now. And so it is important to live consciously in this way, living in awareness. And so if you're eating, instead of at the table thinking about your successes or failures or troubles of the day, or trying to plan what you're going to do after supper, which is all past and future, when you eat, just eat. Fully attend to the act of eating. Eat consciously. And in this way, you really experience and taste and are in tune with what's going on right now. You can do this with most simple activities. Mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, fairly repetitive tasks are really easy because, mowing the lawn, it's almost like a Zen Buddhist walking meditation in that you're just really aware and attending to mowing the lawn. So you're feeling the ground as you're pushing off of it. You're feeling the mower that you're pushing. You hear the mower. You feel the vibration of the mower. You're smelling the freshly cut grass as it's being cut. There is so much to be aware of. At any given moment, there's so much to be aware of. Science has found that conscious awareness can only be aware of so much, and everything else lands in subconscious awareness because conscious awareness just can't keep it all. And so when you're trying to just be open and aware to everything, you may find that the mind slows or stops. There's no room for thought. And even if a thought arises, it's not relevant, so it isn't paid attention to. And in this way, you're becoming more and more deeply ingrained in the now, the here and now. In the same vein, it's helpful to, at times, have periods of sitting meditation, which is just sitting and being aware. In Zen, they call Zazen just sitting. And so just like I mentioned earlier of just eating, just sitting is just sitting. You're not doing anything. If you find you're doing something, cease doing it. Put your attention on just sitting and being aware. What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you feel? Not only across the skin, and the weight on the ground, but what do you feel internally? Tensions. Maybe you feel your own pulse. There is so much to be aware of. But we don't pay attention. We don't attend to all this, stimulus most of the time. Instead, we're lost in thought. You've seen people so lost in thought that they'll bump into somebody on the street, bump into a lamppost, trip over their own feet, because they are so in thought that they're not paying attention to now. And so what I'm suggesting is to go on the other side of the spectrum, to be so now, there's no room for thought. And so it's important to, I would say regularly, daily, sit for a period of time, because in this, you're not doing any physical actions at all. So you can really, in an undistracted way, especially if you go into a quiet environment, in a very undistracted way, you can delve into the here and now all the more. And when you are sitting, just sitting, there is a deep silence, a deep stillness. And so you just abide in that stillness or silence. And so in being present, either sitting or living consciously or, day to day, it's important to cease manipulating. It's one of our activities we do all the time. We're always trying to manipulate. And this is where, if you're sitting and you're like, well, I'm trying to become enlightened, I'm trying to become a Buddha, I'm trying to quiet my mind. I'm trying to do this. You are trying to manipulate what is. Cease manipulation. Don't try to alter or change anything. Just allow it to be as it is. Surrender to what is. It is what is. Just be open and aware and surrender to what is. And that also helps deepen presence and living consciously. Instead of trying to get somewhere else or get something from the practice or trying to change something that you notice within just being present, don't try to change anything. Just, cease trying to manipulate. Be with what is as it is for as long as it is. Not trying to cling or repel to anything. And so often we try to cling and repel to experience. When something we don't like arises, we go, no. We may not say it verbally, but there's this internal no. And what I'm suggesting is to eternally and unconditionally say yes to everything. Say yes when you are just sitting in meditation to whatever experience is there. Let it be. But just attend to what is in the here and now. That's the most important place. That's the most important. If thought about past and future come up, again, don't resist it. You're not trying to deny it. You're not trying to change it. You're just not paying attention to it. You just let it go. And so when you're trying to live consciously, you're also trying to embrace what is. You're embracing the experience. You're not trying to say no or resist it. And so as you're living consciously, it's important to not fret about the past. Don't dig it up. Don't fret over it. Don't worry about the future. The future is unknown. No one knows the future. And yet we worry and make ourselves miserable over imagined possible futures that may or may not even occur. I think it was Mark Twain said something to the effect of, and all of his, worries, many of his worries never come to pass. I can't remember what he said exactly, but that was the gist of it. And all of his worries, most don't come to pass. So don't worry about the future. And then the past is the past. You can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. So why fret over it? You can only do what you can in the now. So don't fret over the past. Let it go. Let the past go. Let the future go. Just be now. Now, don't try to make an absolute rule out of this because, if you need to go to the store, you need to plan what you're going to get. Well, I'm out of milk, so I'm going to get milk while I'm there. I need this. I'm going to get this while I'm there. Yeah, there's a little bit of planning involved. There's a little bit of future thought, thinking about the future. But it's necessary when you're trying to figure out what you're going to get at the store. It's necessary if you're trying to plan a trip. It's necessary if you're trying to do something. But by and large, you don't need to think about the future. You only need to look up occasionally, so to speak. And what I mean by that is when you're hiking through the woods, you only need to find a point or something, a reference point, a mountain or something you can see in the distance so you don't lose your way. And you only occasionally need to look up to see if you're still on track. If you're constantly looking up to stay on track, you're going to be falling into hills and tripping, falling into pits and tripping over vines. You're not going to be aware of the dangers around you at the very moment. But if you're constantly focused on the now, it's easy to get lost if you're trying to get somewhere. So yeah, a little bit of planning is needed. So don't make it an absolute rule. But by and large, live in the here and now. Not concerned about past, future. Not clinging and repelling. Not trying to manipulate. So that's the first thing I would recommend. The second is, ultimately the whole idea boils down to tatvamasi, which is you are that. You are that. You're already that. You've always been that. Of course, people will say, well, sure, that may be true, but that isn't my experience. I don't know that. And that's where the rub is how do I realize that? Well, the reason that it's so hard to realize you are that is because you think you are something else. And so the second thing I recommend is self-examination. Deeply delve into and inquire into everything that you identify with, everything you think you are, and doubt it, question it, re-examine it, because only if you deeply see for yourself, concretely, almost intuitively, that you are not really that, will you cease identifying with that. As long as there's some open doubt, there'll be a continued identification with it, because the identification is already so ingrained that only the light of truth can dispel this ignorance. You have to see what's true, and the truth is you aren't that. And so if I know some people are very attached to their religion or something. Well, I am whatever. Well, are you really that? Obviously not, because if that was a total roll of chance due to your parents and culture. Because if your parents were in a different religion, they would have raised you probably in a different religion, and you would very likely believe you were in that other religion. So in this way, and that's a very simplistic example, but you need to delve very deeply into everything that you identify with and see you are not that. And I think this is the root of the original, the exercise in Hinduism of Neti, not this, not that. Unfortunately, they often treat it as a very mechanical mental activity of just dismissing. No, I'm not that. I'm not that. And you just keep dismissing over and over and over again. And there's no need to dismiss over and over and over again. You only need to see the truth that you are not that but once, and then you'll never need to dismiss it again because you'll never believe it. And so that's what I suggest, is this deep seeing that the stuff that you think you are, look at it and realize you are not that. Now, granted, this is a little bit of doing. This one is more process oriented, but I think it is helpful. It has some value in shaking up the me and breaking the firm structure, and it allows it to be seen through easier when the cracks form. So now, by extension, I also recommend the exercise that Ramana Maharshi suggested, which is self-inquiry. And that's the question, who am I? And you delve into this, who am I? It's not a mental mechanical doing. I like what H.W.L. Punja had said as he explained it further. He said, later after Ramana Maharshi died, that so many people are going like, who am I? Who am I? And they're making this mechanical almost mantra. And he goes, that isn't it. You only got to mentally, not mentally, but in your being, send out the request but once, who am I? And do nothing, absolutely nothing, and see what is there. And so it's not a mechanical thing, but that's another way to get a glimpse, is who am I, and just see what's there. Now, funny enough, if you get a inner feeling or response of, I don't know, abide and don't know. It is okay to just abide and stay and don't know. Stay in that. Continue to stay in that. And that's fine. Zen Buddhism, Korean Zen Buddhism in particular, likes the idea, or actually suggests the practice of abiding and don't know. So, but in that not knowing, it's there. Now, the other thing is Ramana, when he talked about self-inquiry, would say You're trying to follow the I thought. So if the feeling was just don't know, just abide and don't know. If it was more formed into an I don't know, well, then you might say, well, who is this I? And try to follow that I thought to its source. And in that way, when you're trying to get to its origin and source, you're getting to prior to the I thought, which is silence, and then you abide in silence. Interesting exercise, I think, also in self-examination, because briefly returning to that, in Hinduism or Indian philosophy, it's been said, it's not the truth or knowledge that must be found. It is that falsehood and ignorance must be dispelled. And so when you're self-examining, that's really what you're doing, is you're just trying to dispel the falsehoods and ignorance. And this gets back to the guiding principle, because what is falsehood or ignorance but what isn't? And what is truth and knowledge other than what is? And it's really hard to see what is when you're taking what isn't to be what is. Because then you have to see through all that extra stuff. But if you get rid of what isn't, what you're left with is what is. So, but these exercises all revolve around cease identification. So, much of being present had, different benefits of, stilling the mind, being present, living consciously. But a lot of it was also about ceasing to manipulate. This self-examination, self-inquiry, its focus is more on ceasing to identify. And those are the two primary things we're trying to cease. We're trying to cease manipulation and cease identification. Now, I know that it's important to look through what you're identifying with and see through that, because most people identify with the body or identify with the mind or both. And as long as you identify with the body or the mind, it obstructs and makes it very difficult to realize what is, because you're not the body or mind. And as long as you some deep level believe you're the body and mind, it's really hard to see past that. It's kind of like the old snake and rope analogy in India. If a piece of rope is in the grass and you mistaken it to be a poisonous snake, and so you're freaking out and trying to stay away, it's really hard actually to look deeply at that piece of rope so that you can realize it's a piece of rope. Because now you've got this image and built up concept and all this stuff is being added on that it's a snake. And it's really hard to see past the snakeness, because now that you believe it's a snake, the mind and everything it's trying to do is trying to confirm that it's a snake. Belief is dangerous that way. Belief tends to filter and tint our perceptions. If you really believe it's a horrible world out there, it looks more and more horrible every day. Because the mind will filter and tint everything. It'll highlight the horribleness. However, if you are appreciative and generally content and good-natured and happy, the world will steadily look better and better, really, because it has a certain tinting effect the other direction. If the tint and bias is I am the body, I am the mind, it's really hard to see through that. So it's trying to break down this identification with the body and mind. You aren't the body, you aren't the mind, but you need to know this deeply, beyond the mental. It's not a mental, yeah, I know I'm not the body, because you can very easily say, yeah, I know I'm not the body, and yet be fearful of death. If you really are not the body or mind, there would be no fear of death. Death only affects that which is born, which is the body. So there can be this disparity between what we mentally believe and what we deeply feel. And so it's got to get down to a deep, in the bones, in the gut, in the being. You need to see that you are not the body, you're not the mind. And then you'll never be fooled into thinking you're the body or mind again. The last part that I want to cover is, well, these two are important. I think just day-to-day living, it's important to attune and live in accordance with the way. And the way is love, truth, harmony, and unity. Now, these four are all unifying factors. Love brings people together. It brings people together. Love. Truth, there's only one truth. There isn't multiple truths. And so, if there's a disagreement, but both people then really see the truth, they're brought together because it's common. Harmony brings people together in much like a symphony or an orchestra. If they're in harmony, all the instruments are playing together and sound as if one thing. If there's a dissonance or disharmony, things are out of tune. They're not playing together. So as things harmonize, they're brought together. And then unity, of course, is obviously a unification factor. If you quit trying to divide and you're unifying things, that's unification. And so I find that in living in accord and trying to attune with the way of love, truth, harmony, and unity, it helps, how we live and how we think kind of shapes, what we practice kind of shapes how things come to be and how we experience the world. And so if you're always bringing together through love, truth, harmony, and unity, you're not dividing. You're getting past the division. And again, this is kind of a not doing, really, because what our very essence and being, the self, is love, truth, harmony, and unity, because it is unifying. Only in ignorance do we hate, and hate involves another. And so I'm saying, cease hating. Lies tend to divide and distract and create misdirection. Cease lying as best as you're able. You are, disharmony, conflict, separates. Cease doing that, and then there's harmony. So if you cease trying to divide, unity is already there. And so it's more about, again, ceasing to do. What's important is what we cease doing. And so it's part of it's just the way language is, to say the way is love, truth, harmony, and unity. But the doing is actually the opposite. You cease hate, you cease lies, you cease disharmony, you cease dividing and separating. So, but there's multiple levels of possibility within this, because within love, there's the Buddhist practice of compassion and kindness. That's part of love. Within love, there can also be devotion. So there could be kirtan and bhakti. Ultimately, it's the self that's being devoted to, but I deeply enjoy kirtan, and it is love-based. There is also appreciation, which is part of love. And so, just trying to appreciate as much as you're able every day tends to help a great deal, because now you're focused on appreciating. You're constantly looking around and appreciating what is as it is. And that's an interesting practice. Truth, try not to lie or misdirect or confuse as much as you're able. Especially to yourself. Be brutally honest with yourself. if if you really feel yourself to be the body because of fear of death or other things that are consequences of this, then you must be brutally honest with yourself that you don't really believe that you're not the body. Even though you may have heard it, you'd like to believe it, you might tell people, oh yeah, you're not the body. If something deeper within you is like, nah, I don't buy that, you really have to be honest and go, okay, I do believe I'm the body. Because you have to delve into it. You have to explore that. You have to examine it. And as long as you're lying to yourself, you're not going to look. Try to, I mean, harmony, part of it is, nonviolence. Not adding to conflict, not fighting, not struggling with others, the world, yourself. Ceasing conflict. It is harmony is letting go of restlessness and just, stilling. Because you look around at nature, it's not restless. You can't defend restlessness as something that's natural. We make ourselves agitated, and that's actually against harmony. Harmony flows. It's more like water. In harmony and practicing harmony also includes practices like trying to live more in a collaborative or cooperative mindset. You never struggle and fight. You never conflict. Instead, you yield and try to act cooperatively and cooperatively. In this way, it's almost like a keto at times, because in a keto in particular, you never go force against force. That's a big no-no. And so if someone comes at you to grab, you go with the force. And then you start working with the force and redirect it. And so you need to build in this never automatically resisting, saying no. That's disharmony. That's conflict. Yes to whatever is harmony. And then unity. Other practices could be as simple as ceasing to try to divide, to compartmentalize, to separate. Unity is just trying not to limit. Limitation is just another way to compartmentalize. Ceasing to try to limit yourself as I am just this. So, but it's something to explore. But delve into the way of love, truth, harmony, and unity as a way of life, a way to attune with unity and unification. So I'm going to very briefly summarize. So you have the two guiding principles of it's about ceasing to do. It's about what you cease doing, not about what you do, primarily. And to distinguish between what is and what isn't, and focus on and attend to what is, and let go and disregard what isn't. Those two guiding principles, along with being present, living consciously. Second, self-examination, self-inquiry. And then third, living in the way of love, truth, harmony, and unity. And this is what I would suggest when someone says, guide me. What should I do? This is what I suggest. But if you like what I said, please give it a thumbs up. If you got any questions, comment below. Please share the video. Also, if you like my videos, please subscribe and be notified of future videos. But thank you much.